My name is Jack Turner, and the day my grandfather's lawyer called me into his office, I thought it would just be a routine meeting about farmland and a few old properties. My grandfather had owned land all across the county for decades, pastures, wooded hills, and a few small lakes scattered across the valley. Nothing about that surprised me. What did surprise me was the lake. The lawyer slid a large map across the table and tapped a blue section that stretched across a huge area near the northern edge of the county. That's Lake Briarwood, he said. 2,100 acres of water. I nodded. Everyone in the county knew about that lake. It was one of the biggest freshwater lakes in the region. People fished there, kayaked there, and during summer the shoreline was full of families enjoying the water. But what the lawyer said next caught me completely off guard. You didn't inherit the lake itself, he said. You inherited the water rights. At first I didn't fully understand what that meant, so he explained it. Decades earlier, my grandfather had purchased the original water rights to the lake when the area was still mostly farmland. Over time, small developments had grown around the shoreline, and eventually a large residential community had been built on the southern side of the lake. That community was called Briarwood Shores, and like most large developments, it came with an HOA. The houses, docks, and shoreline property around the southern edge belonged to the residents. But the legal rights to the lake's water usage belonged to me now. At first, nothing changed. The lake was peaceful, just like it had always been. Early mornings were quiet except for fishermen launching small boats from the public ramp. In the evenings you could see kayaks drifting across the water while the sun set behind the hills. For several weeks I didn't hear anything from the neighborhood. Then one afternoon a black SUV pulled into the gravel road that led down to my small fishing cabin near the lake. A woman stepped out wearing sunglasses and carrying a thick folder. I recognized her immediately. Karen Whitfield. Karen was the president of the Briarwood Shores HOA. She introduced herself and got straight to the point. We need to discuss the lake, she said. I leaned against the porch railing and waited for her to continue. Karen explained that the residents of Briarwood Shores considered the lake part of their community. Many of them had private docks extending from their backyards, and several homes had boat lifts installed along the shoreline. According to her, the HOA had been managing lake access and usage policies for years. Then she said something that made me raise an eyebrow. The HOA will continue managing the lake as we always have, she said. I nodded slowly. That's interesting, I replied. Karen didn't notice the tone in my voice. She pulled a document from the folder and began explaining the community regulations that residents followed when using the lake: boat limits, dock restrictions, fishing guidelines. Then she added something new. Starting this summer, she said, the HOA plans to limit outside access to the lake. That caught my attention. What do you mean by outside access? I asked. Karen gestured toward the distant public boat ramp. We plan to restrict public launches and require permits for anyone who isn't a resident. I stared at her for a moment. Then I asked a very simple question. Did you check who owns the water rights? Karen hesitated slightly. The lake is part of the community, she said confidently. That was the moment I realized she hadn't done her homework, because the water rights weren't part of the community. They were part of my grandfather's estate. And now they were mine. A few weeks passed, and sure enough the HOA installed new signs near the shoreline. Private community lake resident access only. Fishermen who had been visiting the lake for years suddenly found themselves being questioned by HOA volunteers. Some people were told to leave. Others were warned they needed permits. Word spread quickly around town. Eventually someone contacted the county office to ask whether the lake had actually become private. That's when the situation started getting interesting, because the county records clearly showed something important. The shoreline property belonged to the homeowners, but the lake's water usage rights belonged to me. A few days later, the county requested a meeting between me and the HOA board. Karen arrived looking confident, just like before. She explained that the residents wanted exclusive access to the lake and believed the HOA had the authority to enforce those rules. The county official asked a simple question. Do you control the water rights? Karen paused. Then she admitted the HOA did not. The official turned toward me. Mr. Turner, he said, would you like to clarify your position regarding lake access? I nodded. Then I explained something Karen clearly hadn't considered. The water rights allowed me to determine how the lake's water could be used and who could use it. That included boating permissions, dock usage approvals, and shoreline water access. The room became very quiet. Karen suddenly realized the HOA had tried to control something they didn't legally own. Over the next few weeks, the HOA was forced to remove the signs and stop restricting public access. But the situation didn't end there, because the new attention on the water rights triggered a full legal review of the shoreline developments. During that review, something surprising came to light. Several of the private docks built by Briarwood Shores residents had never been properly approved under the water rights agreement. Technically speaking, they weren't authorized. The HOA had allowed them to be built without checking the legal requirements. Now that the issue had surfaced, the county required the docks to be reviewed. Some were approved, others had to be modified, and a few had to be removed entirely. Karen was furious. But the law was clear. The HOA had overstepped its authority by trying to control the lake without owning the rights to it. These days, Lake Briarwood looks the same as it always did. Fishermen still launch boats at sunrise, families paddle across the water during the summer, and the residents of Briarwood Shores still enjoy the view from their backyards. But the HOA no longer pretends the lake belongs to them, because the moment they tried to take control of something they didn't own, they ended up losing every bit of authority they thought they had.